Okay, so it is our official start time now. I can see it is officially 4 o'clock here in the UK. So I will get started shortly. I do like to start promptly. If anybody else arrives, then they can catch up with us. This session is also going to be recorded, so it will be available afterwards. So of course, you're free to watch the recording. And anybody who needs to catch up with it afterwards can watch that as well. As I mentioned previously, please do feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom. You will notice when you go in there that you can change the drop down for who the message is to send it either to host and panelist, which will be myself and my colleague Liam, who is helping moderate this session, or you can send it to everyone if you want to introduce yourself to everybody. There is also a Q&A feature, which I will be encouraging you to ask questions in there, because it just helps us record your questions and see who's got answers and who's still waiting for an answer. So, welcome to a guided tour of Totara's help documentation. My name is Domi Sinclair. You can see a picture of me there. I'm a technical writer for Totara Learning. We'll go to the next slide. Here we go. So as I mentioned, my colleague Liam Tanner, who is also a technical writer, there's two of us. He will be moderating, so he'll be answering your questions as we go along and monitoring the chat. If anybody needs any support in there. And as I said, again, ask your questions in the Q&A section if you can, but Liam will try and pick them up if you do ask them in the chat as well. So just to start with, what will we cover in this session? So we'll start with a little bit of an overview about what help documentation is. Then we'll look at the Totara help versus the Totara community, because there is sometimes confusion between these two different sites. We'll then have a little bit of a talk about who help documentation is for, of course, where you can find help documentation. We'll then have a look at the live help site, so I can point out some of the top tips and best ways to navigate the site. And then we'll finish off by looking at how you can rate and give feedback on help documentation to help that continuous improvement of the site. So, what is help? Well, help is many things. It's an exploratory tool, so it can help you look and see what's possible in the system, either before you've even got a Totara product, or once you do have it, help you see what's possible either with what you're currently using, or what might be possible outside of your current usage of a product, or even with another Totara product that you might want to add on to help extend your usage within your organization as your needs change. It's also an enabling tool, so it can help unblock you when you get stuck, and it can help guide you through your journey using Totara with the various how-to guides on how to use our different features and customize it to your organization and the needs that you have. To continue the alliteration, because I am a fan of that, it's also an explanatory tool. So it can help outline different features, what they're designed for, and help you get a better understanding of the Totara product that you might be using and the Totara Talent Experience platform as a whole, so that you can better utilize it for your needs by understanding it. Okay, so here we can see we've got the Totara Community site, which includes the Totara Academy, with all our training courses, and the Totara Help site. And you can see the two URLs for those sites at the top here as well. So taking a bit of a deeper look at help versus the community, it's not really a versus thing, they complement each other. So the main differences, I would say, is that Totara Help requires more passive consumption. So it's more about reading how-to guides or the explanatory articles. looking at the screenshots to get a better sense of how stuff works and watching videos. So it's more of that consumption of content where you're taking information in, but not necessarily contributing everything, because that's not necessary when using help articles. The Totara community, on the other hand, is more about active engagement. So it's about connecting with other users, be that within your own organization or within your industry, other people using Totara, asking questions and possibly giving answers if you happen to have some expert tips on how to use a particular feature that someone else is asking about, or if you have a similar use case to them that might be a seemingly niche thing, something specific to your industry perhaps. It's also accessing training resources where you obviously then participate in that training to help you learn and be able to utilize the system to the best of its ability. Of course, you can be more passive on the community, but it's really designed there for that sort of engagement, whereas help is not. So you're going to get the best experience if you're using both of them. And they both do complement each other, and you will see a lot of cross-referencing. So on Totara Help, for example, where there's a relevant Totara Academy course within the community, you'll find links to that on the help page. You'll also see, as this screenshot illustrates, videos which are taken from the Totara Academy. Similarly, within the Totara community, you might see links within forum responses, and within Totara Academy courses, there will be relevant links to help documentation to help you get that deeper level of knowledge and understanding, and the step-by-step guides that are there. So that's kind of how those two things are different. Are there any questions at this stage, Liam?
No, none yet.
Cool. So then I'll keep going. So who is help for? Well, I'm obviously slightly biased, being one of the technical writers that writes it, but really it is broadly for everybody at every stage of their journey. So a lot of the content is aimed at site administrators, but there's also a lot of stuff there for content creators. So whether that's people creating courses, performance activities, or workspaces in Totara Engage. There's also a lot of content for developers as well. We actually have a dedicated Totara public developer documentation site, which I will have a quick look at when I do my live part of the presentation. And there's also content on there for Totara Engage content creators, which could be anybody at your organization. If you have Totara Engage, then it's a platform that's open for everybody to be a content creator. There is some content in there for learners if you're using Totara Learn, but that is more limited. The content within help documentation covers everything from the initial setup, so how to install Totara, how to configure it to best suit your organization and the requirements that you might have, all the way through to various advanced usages that may end up coming quite tailored to your particular needs within your organization. It also helps keep you up to date. We have a What's New page, which lets you know what's new for each version of the product. From Totara 13, that is arranged by product, so you can easily skip to the product you want to know about if you only have one or two of the products, and obviously you can just skim through the whole thing if you have all products for the full Totara talent experience platform. For the earlier versions, it's arranged more by user type, so you can see what might be useful for different users. Again, I will look at this page again in the live demo. So now that you've all been convinced of how useful help is and how it's going to help unblock you and expand your understanding of Totara, you're probably desperate to know how you get access to it. So there's various ways. You can go directly via the URL, which is totara.help. Also, I'm not sure whether many people know this, but on the Totara help site, actually, as well as the community and our website, in the top left corner, there's a square made up of smaller squares. If you click that, that actually expands and has links to Totara help, the Totara community, and the Totara website. So I will show you that when we go into the live demo. From the Totara community, there is a link in the top navigation bar to help documentation, which you should be able to see in the top screenshot here. And in the bottom screenshot, that's taken from the Totara website. If you go to resources, you'll then see a link to Totara help documentation under there. So there's various different ways depending where you are. Of course, you can also just Google Totara help or Totara and HR import, whatever it might be. That's another way, quite a common way actually, that people get to our help documentation. So let's move on and have a look at the help documentation. So let me just switch across. So we'll just check now. Liam, can you see the help documentation site now?
Yes, I can. Just before we get onto this, we've got our first question, if you wanted to address that now.
Yes, please, yes.
Okay, so Claire asked, does the Totara community have a social networking type interface? So
for the Totara community, I wouldn't necessarily call it a social networking interface. There's various spaces where you can ask questions. So there's forums that you can ask questions in, and there's also workspaces you can participate in. Those are probably slightly more towards the social networking element. And they have a mix of discussions and also the ability to share different resources. The workspaces are using the Totara Engage product. So I recommend going into the community and having a look at those anyway. If you haven't used Engage, it's a nice way to get a little bit of a flavor for it by just going in and signing up for the community. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so Claire has just followed up asking if you can talk live with people.
It very much depends whether people are on at the same time. I don't think there's necessarily like a live chat function within the community. I can double check that, but it's more of a asynchronous communication. But obviously, if people happen to be on at the same time, then you can sort of instantly reply to people. Any other questions, Liam, before I move on?
Yeah, we just got one other question in the Q&A. Will there be a separate webinar on how best to navigate, leverage Totara community, as searching the forum can sometimes be tricky?
I don't know if that's planned at the moment, but I can certainly give that feedback. And I'm sure they can look and see whether there's anyone available to do that.
Okay, great. That's everything for now.
Just making a note to myself about the community webinar so I don't forget. If I don't write things down, I'm not as strong at remembering them. Okay, so moving on. This is the main landing page for the Totara help site. There we go. So now you can see the squares I mentioned before, or the square of squares. So if I click that, now you can see those links. So that works exactly the same on the Totara website and on the Totara community. That's a nice little shortcut to get you between the different spaces. Looking more at the actual help specific landing page, you've got a search bar in the middle here. This particular search will search across Totara versions. So when you search for something, it will show you underneath the version that it's coming from as well. You've also got this little slideshow highlighting the different products that we have, which at the moment are Totara Learn, Totara Engage, and Totara Perform. And if you click on any of those, it will take you through to a help page with more information about that product. There's also a link here that lets you know how you can find out what version of the system you're using. If you're not sure what version you're on, then that can be relevant to help documentation, because our help documentation is currently versioned. So then at the top here, you'll see a link to the latest version of help documentation, which at the moment is Totara 14. A link to the Totara mobile documentation, that's for our official mobile app. Other versions, so if you expand this, then you can see previous versions, so 13, then various different Totara Learn versions, going all the way back to Learn 1.1, although I don't know that anybody's still on that version. And also Totara social documentation is there as well. And if we come to more help, you'll see that's where we find the developer docs, which we will have a little look at later. So I'm just going to start by going to Totara 14. Most of the landing pages are similar to this, particularly for the more recent versions. So you'll see that there's a search bar on here, which stays consistent when you navigate between pages on the version. That search is version specific. So if I type something in here, it's only going to search Totara 14 documentation rather than searching across all versions of documentation. For 14, you'll see that we have the different products and then some quick links to common tasks for those different products. There's also a link to the what's new. And I'm just going to quickly point out that there is this feedback option and also this provide feedback link, which actually just stays in the same location as you scroll. We will come back to those after the live demo, where I'll give a bit more information. So if we look at a page, I mentioned what's new already. So let's have a look at that one to start with. So you can see you've got your main body of content here, this consistent search bar at the top, and there's a table of contents here on the left, so you can quickly skip to sections. So if, for example, I was using Totara Learn and I knew I was using SCORM, so I wanted to quickly jump and see, oh, there's a new SCORM setting, you can just click that and jump down and see that it's a setting about force new attempt. And then click this read more will take me through to the documentation page for that, where I can get all the details of how to access that setting. Below the table of contents, I've got this page tree for the site. So if I want to browse for a page, I can do that from here. I will just point out that we've got this, most of the top level pages, so things like reports, multi-tenancy, those are what we refer to as Totara platform features. So they're features that you'll get regardless of the Totara product or products that you're using. We've then got a section for learning, which is all the features that are specific to Totara Learn, performance, which is features specific to Totara Perform, and engagement, which is features specific to Totara Engage. We do also have, so if I just quickly go to, for example, one of the learning pages, and that's the content marketplace, for example. Then you will also see a little banner on the page that says requires Totara Learn. So if you see that, that means this feature will not be available unless you have this product. So that can be useful, as you may occasionally find a feature that's very useful, but perhaps you can't find it, and it may be that you don't have that specific product. So that we do try and make sure that we clearly flag that for people. Some other documents that are useful to point out here are these useful guides. So we have quick start guides that are aimed at various different roles. So if we look at the site administrator one, it basically just gives you an overview of some of the common tasks that you might want to do if you're, in this case, a site administrator, and links through to the relevant documentation pages. So a site administrator might want to customize the look and feel of their site. So here's links to theme settings, front page, blocks, all of those kind of things, customizing the languages. And then you'll also see here, there's a link to the theming course in Totara Academy. So that's part of that synergy between the community and Totara Help. And then we've also got other things, so job assignments, adding users, another key thing a site administrator might want to do. So those are some of the useful pages within here. And obviously there's a whole bunch of different things depending on the features you may be using. So it's definitely worth coming in. I can, of course, obviously search for things as well. So if I did want to add a user, I can search here at the top and go to the user accounts page. And then within this page, here's a nice little video from the relevant Totara Academy course and a link to that course. And then here's some steps of how to create a user. And there's links to other documentation pages if you wanted to add a user in a slightly different way, because there are multiple ways to add users within Totara. So that's the main product documentation. I was going to hop over and have a very quick look at the developer documentation. Does anybody have any questions before I do that, Liam?
Yeah, so Claire asked if this is an admin view, or is this
no,
like
this is the view that everybody has.
And one more question in the Q&A. Two more. So is there a way to refine searches as sometimes too many results are displayed? And are the search results sorted or prioritized? So
we do have in our useful guides a guide on searching Totara Help. We are aware within the current system that the search is not ideal. We are looking at potentially moving to a new system with an improved search functionality in the future. But for now, there is a guide here which will show you some tricks on using the search. So the ability to use wildcards or exclude certain words or do fuzzy searches as well if you're not exactly sure. That can also be useful for international searches as well. For example, enrollment, we use the UK spellings within Totara Help. So there is a discrepancy between the UK and US spelling of enrollment. So a fuzzy search for that, for example, might help you find what you're looking for. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. So can these search results be sorted?
So if I do this, so you can go to see more when you get the results, and then you can sort them in some ways. So you can sort by when the page was last modified, for example. So you can do some filtering. Content type, they're all going to be pages for the actual help documentation pages. So again, it's not a brilliant search functionality, but we are aware of that and we are hoping to move to a tool with a better search in the future. In the meantime, I would definitely recommend looking at this page under the useful guides for some tricks on using the search in our current system.
Okay, there are a couple more if you have a minute for two more questions.
Yeah, we'll just do a couple more.
Can users customize their own searches by using their own metadata?
I'm not entirely sure what that question is asking. The parameters that you can use within a search are all detailed on this page. So I don't know whether you can use metadata, I don't think. Do you know anything different on that, Liam?
Claire has clarified, said, sorry, for example, when we upload learning. So I believe that might be referring to the search in Totara sites themselves rather than
Oh,
documentation.
okay. We do have some documentation about search within Totara and how you can customize that. So that might be useful. We have various different databases that you can use for search, which I think might affect things, but I'm not too sure on that one.
Okay, yeah, that's everything for now.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't be more assistance on that particular question. So let's quickly have a look at the public developer documentation, because I'm not sure everybody is aware we have this, even if it's not relevant for you directly. You might know someone who would find this useful. So within the developer documentation, we have these technical documentation. So that is guides to various different features that we have that would be useful for developers, for people who are customizing on the back end of Totara. So for example, if I go to this page about the TUI front end framework, so from Totara 13, we introduced a new front end framework. If you need more details on that, this page explains in detail the background behind it, what it's supposed to do. You get a really clear understanding of it from this page. If you were then trying to do something, for example, come up with some new icons to customize your site, there's a page about icons that then includes steps on how to implement it, snippets of code examples. So obviously, if you're a developer, this is probably going to be very useful for pointing you in the right direction. We also have these technical change summaries. So when big things change, most recently with Totara 13, there's some summaries here just explaining why things have changed. So like the front end architecture, just the reasons why we've changed things and what impact those changes have. So again, that's really useful for getting a deeper understanding for how the system works and why it works that way. Are there any questions about this before I head back over to the presentation?
Nothing yet. We'll give it a second to see if anyone has a question.
I'll just head back over here. So that was a brief look at the help documentation. There's so much in there. I certainly wouldn't have been able to show you everything, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about how to navigate it and what's in there. I did mention I would come back to ratings and feedback. So at the bottom of every page in our help documentation, for both the product documentation and the developer documentation, you'll find this question: did you find this content helpful? With a thumbs up for yes and a thumbs down for no. That's one way you can let us know whether a page was good or bad. And we certainly appreciate both feedbacks. Obviously, knowing if a page wasn't helpful is useful because we can then target that page for improvement. But also knowing if a page was useful is good because we can then try and identify what we're doing right and make sure we apply that across the other help pages to help improve the site overall and make sure we're being as helpful as possible. There's also this provide feedback link, which floats in the bottom right corner of the screen. If you click that, you'll get this form you can see on the screen where you can give more detailed feedback. So if there's a specific problem you have, or a specific bit of praise you want to give a page, you can put the details in there. You can add attachments. You can optionally add your name and email address. I would encourage you to do that. When you do provide contact information, we will then get back to you to let you know any action that we plan to take based on your feedback. And if action is taken, once that's been implemented, we will then get back to you to give you a link to that improved documentation. So, if you are looking for any improvements, then leaving your details is certainly a good way to make sure you know when stuff is actioned. And again, if we can't action something for any reason, we will go back to you and let you know why the change is not possible. But it's very unlikely that that would be the case. So just as an example, wanted to talk briefly about the report sources page. This is an example of feedback being actioned. So within Totara help documentation, we had a report sources page for at least versions 11 and 12 of Totara Learn that detailed the available columns within every report source. Because of changes to the interface in Totara 13, this page wasn't included in Totara 13 documentation, but we then started to receive feedback that the report sources page was actually really useful with its detailing of the available columns within report sources. So based on this feedback, we then re-implemented and obviously expanded to include all the new report sources within that. So there is currently 96 report sources within Totara 14. So 96 report sources in Totara 14. So those are all available as expandable options. Obviously, you can use the table of contents as well to quickly jump to it. One thing I didn't mention on the live demo is control, or whatever the Apple alternative to the control key is, an F for finding within a page. That can be really useful to do as well, particularly on something like this report sources page, which is particularly long. If you do control and F key on your keyboard, and then you will be able to type in whichever report source it is you're looking for, and that will quickly jump you to the right one. So that's a tip I forgot to mention on the live demo. So that's the end of what I had prepared. Thank you for listening. Please do join the Totara community. It's completely free. You can follow us on our various social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're even on Instagram, if that's your thing. You can email us webinars@totaralearning.com. You can also email documentation@totaralearning.com if you have any questions or feedback about the documentation. Are there any other questions at this stage, Liam?
No questions now.
Okay, if you do have any other questions, please do let us know. Of course, you can also send those through via email to documentation@totaralearning.com. But if there are no other questions at this stage, thank you all so much for listening. I hope that's been useful. Thank you.